All right, so let's go over the first real assignment of what we're going to build together. The course follows the philosophy of there's a three-step learning. First, you see me do it, then I see you do it, right? And then hopefully then you go and do it yourself, right? So here in class, presumably you would see me code and whatnot, and we'll go over best practices and design patterns and whatnot. And then the actual assignments, assignment 2, 3, 4, and so on, it's the part where we presumably see you do it, right? And we evaluate you based on what we've discussed in class. And then the project is you go ahead and do it on your own, right? So those are the three layers on what this course follows, the philosophy that it follows. So what we're going to be building is a web application that would allow other folks to build their own web applications, right? Kind of like an online IDE where non-developers, ideally, folks that haven't gone through the rigorous getting a degree in computer science, they can build a website without knowing HTML, CSS, or anything like that. There's tons of these websites out there, Wix, Weebly, Squarespace. There's lots of these online websites that you create an account, and then you can they have templates that you can then drag and drop different widgets on a page. And you can have different websites. Each website you can have many pages. Each page you can drag and drop different widgets. You can rearrange them. You can style them. Obviously, we're not going to get that sophisticated, but let's see how far we can get. So the first part of creating anything is coming up with some specs. And one way to formally describe those specifications is by listing the use cases. What are the various use cases that we're targeting to implement, or what do users want to be able to do with our application, right? Before deciding on a user interface and user experience and data models and whatnot, this is what users want to be able to do. Developers like to register, log in. They like to view their profile. They like to be able to update their profile. They like to log out. And somewhere, somehow, your user interface, in all those pages and buttons and widgets that you're going to create, you need to provide the logic, the user interface, the data model that implements these use cases. How we define where we put it, right? That's another issue. Okay. But this allows us at least to know, right, when are we done, right? Here I've grouped together the use cases. I've grouped them together by the type of object that we are manipulating. So for instance, if we're interviewing the owner of this, who wants this website that we want to build for, right? They'll start describing the system, and they'll talk about users and developers, and they'll talk about what they like to be able to build websites, and each website will have pages, and the pages will have widgets, and through this discussion, we'll identify certain nouns, right, that keep repeating itself, right, over and over, and also what are the attributes of these nouns, right? That pages have names, they have titles, they have dates that they were created, the dates that they were updated, who owns that page, that website, how many visits, yes? So we start grouping together all the attributes per object, per object type, yes? And the exercise of grouping together and creating a data structure and the attributes and the relationships between all these is the topic of another course, which I believe some of you might be also there in CS 5200. So CS 5200, who's taken 5200 already? not as many as I'd like. So in CS5200, you cover in depth, right, all those topics of how do you what are the methods for analyzing this and coming up with data structure to store all this data? How do you model this? We're only gonna very lightly touch on those topics. I'm a little bit going to assume that you know some of that. Nevertheless, you should be able to get by even without CS5200. We'll touch on some of those topics here as well. Okay. Anyway, here I've grouped them together by the types of objects that we want to store. We want to store data about users. We want to capture data about websites, capture data about pages, widgets, where in the page do they appear, and then I've grouped the use cases based on those types of objects. Right? What do I want to do with websites? Well, I like to be able to view a list of all my websites. Right? I like to create new websites, remove a website. I like to update a website. There are many other use cases that I might put here. Perhaps I want to assign other users to help me out with this website. Maybe I want to change the ownership with somebody else. I mean, there's quite a few other use cases that we might want to consider, right? Right now, let's just stick to these four. Pages, same thing, right? I like to be able to, given a website, I like to be able to list all the pages in a given website. I like to be able to add new pages to a website. I like to be able to remove or update the title of a page, right? I like to be able to look at statistics about that page and whatnot. Yes? For widgets, I like to be able to, given a page, I like to be able to drag and drop the widgets onto a page, right? And I like to be able to configure a widget, right? If it's an image widget, I like to be able to just configure what the image is, maybe upload an image. I like to reorder that widget. Perhaps I don't want it on the top left, but I want it at the bottom right. So I need to be able to reorder it and move it around, drag it. I like to be able to update the title for headings, for paragraphs, for divs, for all different widgets. Yes. For a YouTube widget, I like to be able to copy the URL for a YouTube or the iframe in there. Okay. So those all fall on the use cases for the widget. And certainly, we only have a couple of these described here. We'll add more as we move on to additional assignments a little later. Okay. So presumably, having gone through CS5200, you would analyze this, you would normalize it, you would identify what are all the different classes, and what are the different relationships between these classes, and you would come up with something similar to this. Okay, and I guess this is the solution to the first assignment in CS5200. Maybe I should change this. Okay. All right, those are 5200. Don't look at this. So these are some of the classes that represent the data that capture the relationships between all the different objects and data structures, right? So we might have a base class that represents all persons, right? That captures all the common attributes of users and developers. There might be a one-to-many relationship between people and the websites, either a developer that is building a website or a user that is using the same website. A website has one-to-many pages. Each page can have many different widgets, and each widget, there are many types of widgets. There's a header widget, there's a label widget, there's a paragraph widget, text and whatnot, right? They're form elements, right, that you can drag and drop, input fields, drop downs, text areas, different widgets that you can drag onto the page to create maybe a form, right, on a page. Let's see, and each one of these has different attributes, right? Some of the attributes are common to all widgets, right? So for instance, in the base class widget, you might have, a width, height, background color, foreground color, maybe a class that styles this particular widget. And then And then each special case, right, provides attributes that are specific to that particular widget, right? So you might have on an image widget, you might have the URL for an image, right? Which it's not available in the paragraph widget, right? In the paragraph widget, you might have just a piece of text. That's it. In a heading, you might have the size of that heading, size 1, 2, 3, 4, and so on and so forth. Right? So different widgets have their own specific attributes. These classes here are not meant for this assignment. They're meant for much later assignments, which captures the capability of being able to respond to events. Right? Somebody might be able to click on a widget, right? And we like to be able to capture that event and then operate on that event, right? Either pop up an alert, or change somebody's color, somebody's width, or send a message to a database for insertion, for creation, for deletion, for updates, right? Okay, so we're not going to talk about this just yet. All right, so somebody has gone through the trouble of designing this already, right? So somebody from 5200 assignment number 1 would come up with something like that, and then we're asked to provide a prototype, right? Where in the first phase of talking to our client, we sort of think we understand what they're asking us to do, and we would like to prototype it real quick. Maybe like a week turnaround, come back and say, hey, is this what you mean? Right? And we create a prototype that it's a static prototype, right? It doesn't really have any real logic. It doesn't really have any real data. It's not storing anything. It just allows us to gather more requirements, right? Or validate our requirements. It says, is this what you want? And it's a perfect time for a client to come back to us and say, oh, well, now that I see it, I'd rather move this button here, this input field over there. Let's change the navigation, right? And we haven't gone far enough to that it's not too hard to change, right? The later we change it, the more expensive it will be, right? So early on, we would build a prototype, right? A very thin layered prototype that it could be a paper prototype, right? It could be a PowerPoint prototype, or somebody can whip up really quick a couple of HTML files, right? And style it really quick with Bootstrap and have something that they can click and navigate and give us some feedback, right? So what do you think about this? Yes? So that's the purpose of this first assignment, creating a prototype, so that we can get used to or familiar with the expected behavior, right? That you navigate here, you click here, you go there, and then you come back and whatnot, right? So it also gives us a chance to discuss topics such as responsive design, introduce grid systems, talk about mobile first strategies, and laying out the page in different ways depending on the size of the screen, and whatnot. So a lot of those topics that are very, very interesting, important that to deal with early on. All right. Okay. So again, I have grouped together these pages in terms of the type of object that we're dealing with. So for instance, to deal with user use cases, right, like being able to log in, register, profiles, preferences, all those kinds of things, we have 4 pages that deal with those kinds of things. So the index being the landing page for the home page, right? And then being able to log in, be able to register, be able to manipulate their profile. So those are the 4 pages that deal with a user. Now, for now, all these pages are going to be static, right? So they're not going to be dynamic. Any actual data that you input, it won't actually do anything, right? Nevertheless, it'll give us a chance to, again, deal with some of the user interface issues. Then then we'll have these other 3 pages dealing with the use cases for the website, being able to list all the different websites, to create a new website or edit an existing website, right? Notice we're following a naming convention here, where we start off with the name of the type of object that we're dealing with, and then adding a dash and some feature, or a feature that for that particular object. Right, this is a naming convention we're going to follow along throughout the semester. We'll be talking about naming conventions a little more as we move on. Typically, your team, whoever you're going to be working for, will have their own naming conventions, right? And you would adhere to those naming conventions. You're certainly welcome to suggest changes. Typically, teams have retrospective meetings where everybody speaks their mind and it says it proposes any modifications, any improvements in their process, right? But the important part is that there is a process, right? And those processes, those are dealt in 4500 or 5500. Anybody taking 5500 or 4500? Okay. Yeah. So all those topics of how talking about the process. We're also going to be talking a lot of some of those same processes here in class, but obviously a much lighter discussion. We have also same thing for the pages. We have three pages that deal with pages, okay, that allow you to list. You're given a website, show me all the pages for that website, right? And allows you to create a new page or edit an existing. Same thing for widget. We have a list of a widget, meaning given a page, show me all the widgets on that page, right? Preferably already rendered, formatted correctly. We have a palette, right, that allows you to drag and drop or choose a brand new widget that you want to add to the page. Okay. And for this first assignment, we're going to consider just 3 widgets. Right, the heading widget, the image widget, and the YouTube widget, right? Which do what you think they do, right? The heading widget allows you to edit a heading widget. For instance, choose the size of the heading, right, and provide the text for the heading. Yes. So these are editors that allow you to configure each one of these types of widgets. The image widget allows you to type in the URL of a widget. Right. Later on, we're going to add capabilities of being able to upload an image, right? And then later on, there'll be an assignment that will ask you to connect it to Flickr, for instance. So you can search for an image, right, for a topic or whatever, and then it'll go to Flickr. It'll come back with a list of images, and then you can choose an image. So that's a later assignment. For now, it'll be something static, right? It just will allow you to type in the URL of an image, but not really. It's not going to do anything. The YouTube widget will allow you to type in the ID of a YouTube video, right? And eventually, it'll create the iframe, right, dynamically to render that video on the widget list. Okay. There's a few additional widgets that we're going to be discussing a little later. All right, everybody okay? So again, these are all going to be static, right? And this first assignment walks you through the steps for creating the static content, right? Now the CLI, the Angular command line tool, creates a project that is already hosted. Right, and it's meant for working with dynamic content, right? Dynamic components that need to be compiled, transpiled from TypeScript all the way down to JavaScript. We're not going to be touching that just yet. For this assignment, we'll do that next assignment. For this one, we're going to be working under the assets directory. That's the directory that has been declared to store anything that is static. right? Images going there, CSS files, any JavaScript stuff, right? Any vendor libraries would go in there. They need to be loaded in. And for now, we're going to put all our HTML in there because it's static, right? Everything else outside of the assets folder, it's meant to be dynamic, right? Compiled and interpreted to participate in the broader Angular world, right? So we're going to spend just 1 week there. Next week, when we come back in the next assignment, we're going to move these over and refactor the prototype, right, that we're going to put in here. We're going to put it where it actually belongs, right, as part of a component and as part of a template that is used by an Angular component, and it's going to be feeding data into those templates. Make sense? But that will be next week. So then it asks you to create the landing page, the index landing page, and then create a directory where we're going to put our files, right? Now these files that we're going to be creating, they're going to be representing the view, right, the view of our application. Remember that last week we talked about that Angular enforces the model view controller design pattern, right? That we should always think of, any file we create, any artifact that we create, right? It's going to fall into one of these 3 buckets, right? It's if it's anything to do with displaying content to the user, it falls in the views bucket. Okay. If it's handling any events from the user and fetching data and handling any logic, it falls in the controllers bucket, right? If it's on representing data structures and interacting with databases and storing this, and there's a data model, that it falls in the models bucket. Yes? More on this a little later. So we're going to create a directory here called the views directory, and we're going to do all our work in there. Okay, for this one assignment, I'm going to put all the HTML is going to go in there, and we're going to create directories to handle to host the various files that deal specifically with the user, specifically with websites, specifically with pages and widgets, right? Again, we're imposing a particular data structure. File structure, right, on how to organize these files. Right? If you're doing a simple page, a simple website, right? So many files and directories, it's an overkill. But when you're talking about dozens, hundreds of pages and features, yes, it starts to get out of hand. Right? It becomes a maddening, and we need to organize ourselves, right? Especially it might be a multi-team project, right, where you have multiple teams, several dozen or hundreds of folks working on the same project, right? And just we want to be able to divvy up the various roles and the different who's responsible for what, right? And directory structures allow us to deal with that. Okay. Then we're going to create the landing page, the index page, and here's a snippet. Now the snippet of code was intentionally made very boring. Okay, you're more than welcome to make it look prettier. Okay, and for us it's convenient since the TA it will be very easy for the TA to come to this landing page and just click through the hyperlinks and be able to see all the pages that you've created. Right. So for instance. Here we see that we have added links to every single page that is due for this assignment, right? So the TA can quickly just click through each one and verify that they're there, right? Otherwise, these files refer to one another. They would have to navigate through each one of them, right? It just makes it a little more cumbersome. Okay. So this is just a starter page that is very convenient to us. So here are the wireframes. So typically, as part of the design phase of the interview process and gathering requirements from from our clients, there's a process of providing wireframes, which are either designed on paper or PowerPoint or Photoshop, right? Some really ingenious, somebody who's a guru at Photoshop can really quickly put together some really impressive, beautiful screens, right? That we can then give to our clients for feedback. So, well, what do you think about this? Right, so one of our designers came up with these very beautiful, pretty wireframes, and for the login page, very, very interesting, which describes the name of the page, username and password, login and register. Right? If you click on login, then you navigate to the register. I'm sorry. If you click on login, it navigates to the profile page. Right? Eventually, it'll check to see whether the username and password are actually valid. For now, we don't have any of that logic, right? So just clicking on login will immediately take you to the profile page, regardless of whether you actually type anything. We don't have any logic to deal with that just yet. We need JavaScript for that, right? That'll be next week. Let's see. If we click on register, it navigates to the register page, where in the register page you can type in a username and two passwords to make sure that they're the same. If you can't cancel, you go back to the login page, right? But if you click on register, then you go to the profile page as the currently logged in user. Yes, this brand new user. And in the profile, notice you have labels for each of the input fields. Notice that we don't have labels here, right? It might be controversial. It says, why don't you have labels here, but you have labels over there? So if you're going into fields that might be already filled in, like these over here, then it's a good practice to label them, right, so that you know what this piece of information is. Whereas over here, these forms usually are empty, right, the first time you come in, right? And it's also a good practice to provide, a placeholder, right, as part of the input field, which already is telling you that you're asking for a username and password. It would be a little bit redundant to also have a label, okay? But again, that's preference, right? If you prefer to put a label there, put a label, right? Also, these are only suggestions on what the pages should look like. You're free to, move things around. Maybe you prefer to have these one side by side. Maybe you don't like these to be rounded. You want it to be square. Okay. So you're free to style them at your with your preferences. We do have some guidelines, right? That whatever you do, don't fall out of these guidelines. Okay. So for instance, one of the guidelines is that there's white spaces in between all these fields. See that? And it's the same spacing, right? Also, they're nice and flush. You don't have it in different sizes. Okay. You can't see it, but there's also white space in between the edge, right, and the fields. So they're not flush with the screen. Yes. So those are all guidelines. Within those guidelines, you're free to do whatever you want. But all the elements are good practice that we are imposing on you. Make sense? The color scheme, fonts, move things around, anything that makes sense. And if you can defend your particular, if it falls out of the guidelines, but you still have a very good argument, we'll give it to you, right? If you have a very good argument. Let's see what else. Register. Here's a profile page, and in the profile page we have at least the username, because we created it, right? But you can also type your email, your first name, your last name, and phone number, and any number of other fields. Okay, these are the required fields. You're free to add more fields, right? Additional fields if you want, addresses, phone numbers, emails. If you click on logout, it navigates back to login. Okay, Although some students have suggested that you should actually go to the home page, the landing page. Okay, if you prefer that, that's fine. Okay, that should go to the home page instead of the login page. I think that's valid. If you here's a check mark at the top that allows you to update the values. Right, so you can type type in change your email, change your first name, last name. You click on OK, and it navigates to the same page. Stays here. Right? Ideally, it would come up with an alert saying your changes have been successfully saved, right? To give some feedback to the user. Presumably, the username you can't change, so this should be read-only, right? What else? Let's see. Notice that we're using icons here, icons should be used, when there's no ambiguity of what they mean. Right here, it looks like you should be able to say OK or update. I'm done, right? And then just refresh. Notice that they're centered, right, on the header. There's padding. The padding is the same. Notice that the heading is aligned all the way down. Okay. Also over here, the alignment is the same. Okay. Also, there's white spaces between the input field and the labels. All right. So all those things are part of the guidelines. All right. Also, the header here is fixed. Right. So if you scroll this, right, everything scrolls except the header. Right? The header stays is static, and the footer is also static. Yes.
Does it allow to change the password like this is the preferred
not here. Right? There might be a link that takes you to change the password, right? And that we'll do that later on. Yeah, it's part of another assignment. Yeah. Down below, there's a footer that stays the same throughout the entire application. That allows you to navigate back to the profile. Okay. I use a silhouette icon. Some students have suggested that it should be maybe like a home icon. That's fine if you want to change that. Some students have suggested that they would prefer, instead of icons, putting text, like OK instead of checkbox. I guess it's OK. Put OK here. I'd like you to play around with icons just to give you just a feel for working with them, and to use Font Awesome. All right, so when you click on websites, if you click on websites, it navigates to over here, websites. So here's a portrait mode of the list of websites, and it lists the websites and provides an icon here at the end that allows you to click on it and then edit or modify or the websites. Notice that here I'm breaking my own rule. Right, this should be nicely aligned under the plus sign. It's a little bit jarring, right? There's that spacing. I don't remember why I did that. Now there's different ways of rendering this. Just don't use tables. Okay, we'll talk about it a little later about not using tables. But certainly divs or ULs or there are different ways that you can go about doing that. Let's see what else. Notice that there is a back button here that if you click on this, goes back to the previous view that you're in. In this case, it would be the profile page, right? We navigate to the profile page. If you click on plus, it navigates to the website new page, which I don't have here, it's down below. That allows you to create a brand new website. And this allows you to edit an existing website, right? Also notice here that there is a portrait mode, and then when you switch it into landscape, there's a landscape version. Now, what's missing from here is that in landscape, since you have more space, right? We could put additional columns here, right? And I believe down below in the description, we do ask you to add a couple of columns here, right? I believe we ask you to put the date it was created, right, or when it was last updated. Okay, I think that's what we ask you, dates and whatnot, or maybe the owner, who owns that website. Okay? And so when you switch it back to portrait, right, it disappears. It only shows the name of the website and the icon. Everybody okay? All right. Now, I only say this, that there's a portrait mode and there's a landscape mode. I only say it for the website. Yes? And I show an example. I don't say it, I don't show it for pages and widgets. Well, pages, sorry, for pages. But it's also required for pages. Pages should also have a portrait version and a landscape version. Right? I think I say it clearly in the text, but it's always a question on Piazza. Do we need to create the landscape version for pages? Yes. Okay. I believe it's in the text that it does describe that. All right. So if you click on the plus sign, it takes you to the new website new, and the website new also has a portrait version and a landscape version. Right. So on the portrait version, it just shows you can enter the name of the website, the description of the website. Okay. If you go back, then you're not creating. It's like a cancel. Right. You're just going back. You're not saving anything. If you want to save, you click on OK. Right. You say OK, and then it would save it and then go back to the list. Either way, this one and this one goes back to the list of websites. Right. If you click on this, it'll just abort the creation. If you click on plus, it would add the new website and go back to the list of websites, and presumably it would show the new website you just created. Yes? Right. If you change this into landscape mode, you get this. You get the form on the right, the same form on the right. You get same OK and the back arrow over here. But on the left-hand side, you get the original list of websites, right? The original list of websites. And here, if you say OK, right, or you go back, it goes back to the list of websites, which would be what? It would be this expanded, right, with the new columns. Make sense? Right. So this kind of like opens and closes, right? If you say plus, but if you're in landscape mode, you say plus, this goes back and just shows you the form. Right? If you say cancel, whoop, like that, and then it shows two columns. Make sense? Yes?
Wouldn't it make more sense for if you're canceling out of creating a new website that the less than sign would actually be in between the plus and new website?
Where? Say it again?
So just to the right of the division, just to the left of the word new website.
Okay, here?
Yeah, so that would be the cancel.
The cancel? Like put this here?
Right.
Well, the only thing is that when you go into portrait, it kind of goes back. This is kind of like stays in the same place, right? So this expands to the right. So this one always is there. It doesn't move. So you're saying putting it here?
Yeah, just so that it's a little bit more in proximity to the new website. So.
Okay. But this one goes back to profile, right? This always goes back to profile. Right, whereas this would go to the list, right? So have two back buttons, and then which one goes where though? It wouldn't be clear. Yep.
That makes sense. What if I do want to create a website and I want to cancel
Cancel.
that? That can be
Yeah. Okay. Sure.
Maybe we can put just a cross for cancel, which
Cross.
is more intuitive.
Oh, there you go. I think somewhere I could have sworn there was like a cancel here, and oh, I know where it is. It's down below. Could have sworn there's a delete. Okay, in the edit, there's a delete, right? But it'd be nice to have at least like a cancel there or an X, like you're saying. Yeah, sure. Yes, excellent, good idea. Yeah, could you post that on Piazza so for everybody to your suggestions, right, that we agreed on? Awesome. Okay, website new. On website edit, notice that these two are almost identical to the website new, right? The only difference is that on the website new, these input fields were in this text area were empty. There was no data there because I'm about to create one, right? Whereas in the edit version, this actually has values because it's something that already exists, right? Presumably, this would have gone out to the database, right, on the server and said, give me the information for this particular website. It comes back with a JSON object with data and populate this dynamically, right? And that's what we're going to do starting next week, right? For now, we're going to hard code this content. The content doesn't have to be exactly this, right? You can change it and be something else, right? But there has to be some content, all right, in the edit versions. Okay, that gives us a chance just to play around with the value attributes, right, and the text area attributes. Also, part of the assignment is for you to provide some dummy websites. They don't have to be these websites. You can, your favorite websites are fine. You can edit those and change them to your favorite websites. They don't have to be mine. Also, if you feel the labeling might be a little better, more descriptive, that'd be okay. For instance, you might suggest that instead of edit website, maybe they should say, maybe the name of the website that you're editing, maybe, right? So you're editing this website, right? And then you can see the, although it'd be redundant, right? You can see it here, the name of the website that you're editing. Yes?
In the description UI element, it's draggable. So are there any constraints in that? Like it has to be this width?
It has to have a minimum height.
Okay.
I think it's four rows minimum. Right? But yes, you can drag it to be much larger. Yes.
And the same goes for the width as well?
Okay, so these width, these are behaving like block elements, meaning they're taking the entire width of the page. So as you resize the page, they resize with the edges. Okay, that's one of the best practices in mobile design is that you increase the size of the touch elements, right? So that it's easier for you to click on it in a small screen, right? And we'll talk about that a little later. In the edit. If you in the landscape version, you have again the left-hand side you have the websites, the list of websites, and the right-hand side you have the form that you can edit the website. Eventually, as you click each one of these, right, the right-hand side changes. Right, if you click on here, it'll show blogger content. If you click here, it'll show script testing app content. Not for this assignment. For this assignment, it's always the same content. Yes? Right? Next week, we'll start looking at, you click here, this changes dynamically. Right? For this assignment, it's just static. Right? Again, if you click on delete, it goes back to the list of websites. If you click OK, it goes back to the list of websites. If you click on plus, it navigates to the website new. Yes? All right. So notice that each one of these has portrait and landscape versions. The pages also have, pages behave the same way. Pages behave the same way. But I did not bother to render the landscape versions. Nevertheless, you also have to work on the landscape versions. Yes? Right? Okay, you can't see the borders here. Also, the coloring is a little washed out. These are gray, and you're free to change the color scheme. They don't have to look like this. Some students choose to use different colors for each each part of the application, like one color for websites, one for all the website pages, a different color for all the page pages, and a different color for the widget pages. Right? That's fine. Right? Given some context on where they are in the application. That's nice. And so same thing. You get a list of all the pages. Come up with your own names for pages. And plus gets you to page new. Edit takes you to page edit. Here the OK takes you back to the list, or the back button takes you to the list of pages. If you want to add a cancel button here, it'd be nice. Here the page edit, if you delete, it goes back to the list of pages. If you say OK, it takes you back to the list of pages. If you say back, it takes you back to the list of pages. Yes? All right. All right. This design this is following a pattern, right? Called the master-slave, right? Pattern where or list or summary details design pattern, right? Where you kind of give a summary of everything, but then it allows you to drill down into details of any one of these, right? It's a very common design pattern for implementing navigation across an application. Also, notice that, oh yeah, I forgot. If on the website, if you click on the cog, here it takes you to the details, yes? But if you click on the website itself, right, that allows you to navigate into the website. Right? You click the website and it takes you to the context of the website. So what are the things that are in a website? Pages are in a website. So if you click on the name of the website, it navigates you to the list of all the pages for that website. Yes? Right? So same thing here. If you click on a particular page, then you are choosing the context of that page. Right? It'll show you the data for that page, which is the children of that page will be the widgets. It takes you here to the widget list. So the widget list on the left-hand side shows all the widgets on that page rendered appropriately. Right? So here we have two heading widgets, right, of different sizes. Right, so here we have one of size 2 and one of size 3, I think. Maybe 2 and 4 or something. Okay, with text and size. We have an image widget down here. We have a raw HTML widget over here, right? That somebody copied raw HTML and pasted it in a raw HTML widget, which is not due for this assignment. I think it's the next assignment. And here's another heading widget. Here's a YouTube widget. And then again, a raw HTML widget. Right? Here, you don't have to use this text. You don't have to use that image. You don't have to use this YouTube video. But it has to be some YouTube video, some image, right? Some HTML text. Right? And each type needs to be represented. Each type of widget needs to be represented. For now, notice you have these icons down here. Please ignore them. Okay, I'm sure somebody's going to ask about it, but remember, just ignore these icons. You need to implement those. Also notice that each widget has like a little toolbar, right? That has two icons. One of them is going to allow us later on, not for this assignment, but later on, it's going to allow us to grab it and move it around, okay, and drag it and reposition it elsewhere on the page, right? Reorder it. Okay. The other one right next to it is a cog, which is going to allow us to navigate to an editor for that particular widget. If you click on the editor for the label, for the heading, it would take you to the heading editor. If you click on the cog for an image, it would take you to the image editor, right? Which those are due for this assignment. If you click on the raw HTML widget, it would take you to the editor for the raw HTML widget. That editor is not due for this assignment. Okay, so for now, it's okay that it doesn't take you anywhere, right? It's not due for this assignment. I think next assignment I'll walk you through that. If you click on the YouTube cog, it takes you to the YouTube video editor. Okay. Notice that there's a rounded corner over here, right? And it's flush here and here. It's flush. Okay. Also, you can't see this from the picture, but these are transparent. Okay. You can see through them, and you can see what's behind it. It's a little opacity styling there, and it's above. It's on top of the widget. You can see it. Right? These should be okay, easy to implement. This one's a little more challenging. Let's see what else. Okay, if you click on plus, it takes you to the palette chooser, right? Where you can choose the widget, right? You can choose a header widget, a label widget, a raw HTML widget, a text input widget, a link, a button, an image. For this assignment, only 3 of them are due. Okay, the header, the image, and the YouTube widget. All the other ones are not for this assignment. Right? These 3 need to navigate to the appropriate editor. Right? So the way it's going to work, presumably, is that this should behave as if you would have grabbed this, right, and you drag it onto the page and you let it go, right? If you let it go, how should it display on the page? You know, what should render? Say I drag the image and I let it go. What should render? Well, maybe it should render some temporary image, maybe, yes? Or like a default image, saying maybe edit me or something, right? So meaning that when you drag and let it go, it actually creates an instance of the widget, even though it has some default values. Yes? The same thing with the header, right? If you grab the header and you let it go, again, it should have some default text. Maybe, I don't know, something new heading or something, or heading 1 or something, and maybe so default text and a default size, right? Okay. For this assignment, we're not going to have you drag this. Instead, we're going to make it a little easier. Instead, what you're going to do is you're going to just click on it. You're going to click on it, and it's going to take you directly to the editor of a widget that has already been created for you with some default text. Yes? Make sense? Right? If you click on the header, it would come here and have some default text, maybe heading 1. Now, since we're using this editor for both navigating from the chooser and also navigating from the cog, right? This can be either you're editing a widget you just dragged onto the page, or you just added to the page and you have some default text, or you have text here from a widget that already exists and you've already edited it. Yes? So feel free to put whatever you want here as a default text. Right? This is a drop down, even though it's not rendered as a drop down. Here you can click and then choose what size you want. Right? And the sizes should be 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and 6. Right? So those 6 values. And notice that this says delete because you've actually created a widget, right? It's there, and then you can create it, or you can update it and say OK. All the widgets have a name. Okay, this is the reason that widgets can have a name is that in a later assignment, we're going to be able to refer to widgets, right? So you'd be able to, oh, that widget called first name or something, right? And I want to read data from it. I want to set data to it. I want to programmatically manipulate it by name. So this is what it would allow us to do. And let's see what else. If you say back, it goes back to the list. If you say OK, it goes back to the list. If you say cancel, it goes back to the list.
That's it.
Down below, there's a couple more forms. Here's the images. Here's for the widget image, right? That allows you to type in the URL, the width. It's text. You can set the width and text. Eventually, we're going to be able to choose a file and upload that file, but not for this assignment. Okay? It is asking you here to use the file input field, right? That if you click on that, it'll allow you to navigate to an image for you to upload. Right? On a phone, it'll navigate to your photos library. Right? You can select a photo from your phone. Okay? And we'll do upload a little later. And the widget, the YouTube, allows you to type in the URL of a widget. Again, the width, same thing, 100% or some odd percent, and say OK. And then it adds the iframe. Everybody okay? Right. The navigation here is, again, the navigation in diagram form. This was an attempt at me explaining how this is navigating. I was getting a lot of questions about navigation. I think it captures everything except some folks were suggesting that if you're in the profile and you log out, then you would go to the home page. If you prefer doing that, that's fine. Some of you are suggesting that from the is it from the landscape view? Right. So the OK, cancel, delete. So on the portrait view, I think we're clear, but on the landscape view, I think you have an alternative solution to this, right? So I'll try to capture that in this diagram, right? If you explain it to me, right, I can update the diagram. And down below here is the same information, but in tabular format. Okay? Here are some of the styling guidelines. Use some style library, right? You use Bootstrap, or some of you would prefer to use maybe Angular Material or Foundation or some grid system library that you feel comfortable. We're going to be looking at Bootstrap. So whatever you choose, you need to be able to find the alternative or equivalent, right, in that other grid system. Yes? Right? Also, it's asking you to use strong typing in your fields. So text input fields, text, passwords, email, date, text area. So use the correct input field for the correct data type. Right? Use the file input field for uploading, for selecting files. Also, make sure that you use classes such as form control and placeholders to describe the type of input field. Form control to make them blocks as opposed to inlines. We'll talk about that. Buttons. Either use buttons or use links that look like buttons, and certainly we'll look at Bootstrap on how to style that. Tables must be styled, and they should only be used for tabular data. We don't have any tabular data in any of these, so just don't use tables. Okay, but if you would, then they would only typically be used only for tabular data. Right? There are a couple of other assignments later on that ask you to use tables, okay, and only for tabular data, and they should be responsive. Right? If the table's too big to fit, right, it should be scrollable left and right, without the page being scrolled left and right. Right? So the table should not, if it's too big to fit, force the page to scroll. Okay. Also, somewhere else in here. Oh yeah, use Glyphicons wherever ideal, right, to represent OK, cancel, back, done. Use appropriate Glyphicons. Your Bootstrap has a bunch of Glyphicons, or you can use Font Awesome. It's also a very, very popular set of fonts. Also use white spacing, padding, margins, wrapping, text justification, like typically numbers are justified to the right, text is usually justified to the left. So use those. White spaces, make sure that you're consistent with your white spaces. If you have a margin, 15 pixel margin on the right, there should be a 15 pixel margin on the left. Right? If you have padding between your input fields of 5 pixels, make it consistent, that everything is nicely spaced out. Okay? This is not only for the assignment, it's also for the project. The same requirements. The headings and footers should be statically positioned. Horizontal scroll bars, no horizontal scroll bars unless specifically stated. There's only a few exceptions. If you have an image that you want folks to be able to scroll left and right, because you want to see, that's okay. But it should not force the rest of the page to scroll. Right? It should only be for that one image. Right? Same thing for a table. If the table doesn't fit, you might put additional scroll bars. Right? Only for that table, not the rest of the page. Yes? Okay, so careful. You should not normally have a horizontal scroll bar. Okay? What else? CSS and JavaScript libraries. For development purposes, up until we get to the project, it is okay to use static versions of those libraries locally on your development environment. But eventually, when you deploy this at the end of the semester, we're going to ask you to not use the local versions of your libraries. Instead, we're going to ask you to use the CDN versions, right? Meaning your code that has already been on the cloud, you're going to link to those instead, right? It improves performance, improves download times. We'll talk about that a little later. If you are overriding any styles, to put them in your own specific CSS file. Do not use inline JavaScript, right? If you find a really cool library out there that you need to, do not use inline JavaScript. It should have its own separate JavaScript file that you link in. What else? I think that's it. Deliverables. So the deliverables are always going to be the same thing. You're going to post this, you're going to push this to GitHub, and you're going to submit the URL of your GitHub, right? And the URL of where you're hosting this online. Yes? Right? So it has to be running online, although we're not going to grade you online. Right? The TAs, what they're going to do is they're going to take your GitHub, right? They're going to clone down your project at that particular delivery. Right? So you're gonna create a release. Right? You're going to give it a release name. In this case, the release name, I think, is assignment 2. Right? Once you do the release, you're free to keep going to the next assignment, right? And just overwrite everything in assignment 2. Right? We can always clone down that release assignment 2 and grade you as just assignment 2, and you can feel free to keep going. Right? Do not create separate directories for each assignment. Yes?
Are we just building this on top of the repository we already have? So
Yes.
like that index page that had the test MongoDB thing, we're just getting rid of that and making a new index.
So that first index page, so that's going to be the landing page for this course, right? And that page is, as we'll talk about a little later, that page eventually is going to have to look spectacular, right? That when somebody comes to, that you should feel proud to share this at, as a portfolio in you're looking for a job, or I should feel happy to share this with my colleagues. It says, "Oh, check this out! What my students are doing." The only requirements that for that page is that we ask you to leave a link to that test somewhere, a link to your GitHub for this course, and a link to your project from that page. Right? Everything else, you're free to do whatever you want. Right? Pictures and images and animations, and you can go crazy on that page. Right? And you can use any library that you want on that page. On the project, you should not use your commercially available styles. You have to create your own styles, right, from scratch. Okay.
So the homework will just be part of that repository
Yes, for this case, everything is going to, well, for this assignment, is going to live under the /assets, right? And then the additional assignments will ask you to modify that index page, landing page, right? And then the login, registration, and all the other components that go along with them, right? All right. Okay, so there's more details here on how to push Heroku and whatnot, and you can follow those instructions. Any questions? Make sense? All right, awesome. All right, let's take a short break, and we'll come back right after.